as you look at this, you might wonder, okay, Lisa, so what does giving a girl a softball have to do with leadership? Have any of you ever read this? There's a thing online called If You Give a Girl a Softball, and I found it by accident, and I've read it several times, and every time it makes me bawl like a baby. And maybe you'll discover a little more as I go on why I feel that way. So what is leadership? The Merriam-Webster Dictionary describes it as the office or position of a leader, the act or instance of leading, or the capacity to lead. That's a really generic description of leadership. I believe that leadership is a lifelong learning experience. I think that it's never a destination, it's a journey throughout your life, I hope, because I'm a firm believer in if I'm through learning, I might as well be dead, because that life is about learning. Look at all the things we have to learn out there and get better at and changes. And so I want to learn throughout my life, and I've learned from a lot of different philosophies that I have studied over the years, like the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. On the Edge was another leadership book that I studied. Have any of you ever read that one? Alison Levine is a mountain climber, and she climbed Mount Everest, and the story she tells that she used those experiences to become a really important or a good leader and to share those idealisms with other people. Another one is Brene Brown. She's one of the ones that's popular right now, and I really enjoy. I'm going to quote from her a little later today, but she does a great job. And then, of course, there's the Keys to Personal Success with True Colors, and our very own Trish Tata. She's one of our leaders, yeah. And so, but I just want to say that one of the places where I learned most of the lessons that I have learned so far that has meant to me and made me a better leader is coaching girls softball. So I'm going to tell you just a little bit about that. So I married my high school sweetheart. We met when we were 15 years old, and we got married at 18, and we have 3 daughters. And, you know, like kids always do, they try and dabble in different things, and my kids played, basketball and gymnastics and swim team and volleyball, but their true love was always softball. And so my husband coached my oldest 2 girls, and I ended up coaching my youngest daughter. And it was quite daunting thing, and I'm going to talk to you about that with lifelong learning, because I didn't play softball as a kid, and so, but I wanted to be authentic as I coached these young ladies, and so I had to continue to learn as I went, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. But I want to share with you some of the lessons that I've learned from the girls that I've coached for 11 years. So some of the lessons learned. One of the first things is responsibility. I feel like it's a heavy responsibility being a leader because, like, for instance, in girls softball, each summer I'd get a group of girls together, 12 to 15 girls on my team. I was responsible for them and their families, so that was bigger than just the kids on the team. And the umpires and the other coaches, and all of that was something that I felt very responsible for. And I not only wanted them to have a really good time because they came to the softball field to enjoy themselves for the summer, but also to help them grow and learn. And the responsibility to me was really heavy because if I didn't do things right, you can hurt somebody. I mean, kids are going to carry with them for the rest of their lives some of the lessons that you've taught them. And so I carried that pretty heavily. It was important for me to make sure that they had a good experience. And we talked a little bit about lifetime learning. I learned, throughout your, as a softball player, they have to learn the sport. They have to grow better. And since I didn't play softball as a kid, I had to learn from other coaches. I had to go to clinics. I learned from the girls themselves so that I could grow my skills right along with my team. And it's no different in the workplace. If you're working with folks, whether you're the manager or not, it doesn't matter. You're growing leaders and you're growing each other. And so lifetime learning is very important. This is one of the skills that I learned early on and I'm still developing, but setting expectations up front. I believe so firmly in the fact that you get what you expect. If you set that clear at the very beginning, then you're going to get what you expect. For instance, when I coached girls softball, I would have a team meeting before the season ever started with the parents and the kids and told them what I expected from them. From the kids, if you're going to play on this team, then it's a commitment. I expect you to be there. Your teammates expect you to be there. If you, I want you to cheer each other on. I want you to exhibit good sportsmanship. I want you to work really, really hard. Effort's important to me. And then to the parents, I would tell them, please don't coach from the sidelines, because when they're hearing me and they're hearing you say something different, they get confused. And you can't coach during a softball game. You have to coach during practice. And so I asked them that, and the other thing was, if there's anything I ever do that you have a problem with, don't call it out in the middle of the game in front of everybody and the kids and bring the whole team down. Take me aside later. Let's talk. Let's discuss. Let's figure this out, because it's not about me. It's about our team. And so in all the years that I coached, I only had one incident with a parent that turned out that still bothers me today. But other than that, they followed the rules because I set them out front. And it's the same thing when you're coaching a team or working with a team. Set your expectations at the very beginning. For instance, at Burr Oak Woods, something that was really important to me is that we all watched out for each other, that if you're not going to be at work, you made sure it worked with everybody else so you didn't leave someone hanging with your jobs to do. Make sure that you jump in and work on things together and not, have somebody working hard while someone else is messing around off-site. And I never had those problems. So I think setting expectations right up front is very helpful. In practicing, do you still practice? I did this morning and last night as I practiced for this, It's something that when you stand up here, when you're standing on the field, that's performance time. You're not practicing anymore. So I wouldn't be effective as a coach if a girl was up pitching and she started to struggle, and maybe she was stepping off to the side and that's why her pitch was going crazy. But if I coached her right then, all I would do is get inside her head. You know what I'm saying? But if I took that, she was performing here, then afterwards we go off to the side and we practice to get better. So I like to think of practice throughout your life to get a little bit better, and then remember that game day is performance time. The right skills for the right job, and you talked about this, didn't you, that you have to take all the talents of your team and put it together. And sometimes that's daunting to me, is that as you're thinking in your workplace, because I know what my weaknesses are, I know what my strengths are, I'm very aware of them. So I want to hire people who have strengths where I'm the weakest. But then I want those strengths, so I'm just like, I want those too. But you can't be all things to all people, and so you have to combine those skills together. And what you put together as a team is so important. Whether you're in the leadership, the managerial position, or if you're one of the workers working alongside each other, you need to really celebrate the skills that everybody brings to the job and see how they fit together to have this beautiful finished product. Because it's not about you as the manager or the supervisor, but it's about the whole team, and that team is who makes those beautiful puzzle pieces fit together. And so one thing you don't ever want to do is say, I need this, so I'm going to take this employee or this softball player and make them fit this position, because that is never going to work, right? In team, I know that one of the problems in team is you tend to gravitate towards people who are more like you. Is that true? And it's hard. So how do you relate to someone that maybe is not as much like you? Like Trish's true colors, when you're looking at different personality types, and how do you put those together? I can think of a couple of people at Burr Oak Woods. I like these people, but were they different styles than I am in personalities. And it was hard to find sometimes a common ground. Think about a team that you're on now, or maybe one that you've been on in the past. Was it an effective, efficient team? Did it function well together? And if not, if it did, that's fantastic. But if not, What could you do as a leader to help it to function better? To build a team, I mean, it's always looking out for each other, always trying to find ways to work together. And individuality is great, but it has to contribute to the greater whole, right? Trust. It's easy to talk about trust when it comes to softball. I trust that you're not going to throw the ball at me when I'm not looking at you. I trust that you're going to practice and work hard. I trust you're going to be here tonight. I trust the coach that she's not going to holler at me in front of the fans or the kids. I trust that the parents aren't going to holler at the kids and show good sportsmanlike behavior. How do you exhibit trust in your team, and what do you do to help them learn to trust you? Effort's a big thing with me. You know, I've had kids on my softball team that had some skills. Boy, they had a rocket arm, or they could really smack that ball. They may be a good pitcher or whatever, but if they didn't give effort, if they didn't try, and they were lazy and they'd walk back into the dugout or, you know, trot around the bases or whatever, they were not, in my mind, going to be nearly as successful in contributing to the team as someone that may be a little gangly, maybe even a little awkward, but boy, did she work her bottom off every day, right? And I told you earlier about only one problem with a parent I ever had. I had a little girl on my team, and she was just that. I mean, she was one of the athletes of the school, and she did have a rocket arm. She could hit the ball. And every year, and I don't like the idea of all-star games, I just don't. And so this one year, it was in high school. It was, I think, the last year I coached. That girl that was really good, I didn't put her on the all-star team. I put this other young lady who struggled. She was getting better and better. She wasn't Miss Popularity, but she worked every day so hard. You could see it in her eyes. I want to do everything you tell me to do, Coach. I want to get better. I want to try. And the dad came up to me in the middle of a game and said, this is, you know what? He said, my daughter is much better than this. This is the all-star team. What are you trying to do? And sometimes your conversations are tough. And I had to tell him, you know what? She is good. She does have a lot of skills, but she doesn't give the effort. She doesn't hustle. She isn't supportive of the other kids, and that's why she is not on the all-star team this year. And you know, he didn't accept that very well, but I hope it's a lesson that they learned and that they carried to the future, because that's what it was all about. And that other little girl played in the game and did awesome, and I was proud of her. And you know, to this day, I think she manages Kohl's or something like that now, but I still see her on occasion. So give every effort. You talked about listening, right? So listening is tough, because what do we do when we listen to somebody else? I found myself, I have to work on this all the time, because we're talking, and as you say something, I'm thinking, oh, as soon as she's through talking, I want to say this. I want to tell this story. I want to add this to it. Right? How do we get past that? How do we truly listen to somebody else? I had a gal once, and she was put into a supervisory position because somebody retired in the interim before we hired this new position. And she came to me one day and she goes, they keep asking me questions. I don't have time for this. And I said, if you're in a supervisory role, answering those questions and serving your staff is the most important job you have, right? And so you have to listen to them. You have to take time for them. But man, listening's hard. And with young ladies, I mean, some of the things they say are so out there, you know, kids, whatever age they are. I had 3 nieces down at the lake with me this weekend, ranging in age of 8th grade to a senior, and listening to them. I was like, I have to listen to them. So what can you do to develop your listening skills and show people you care? One of the things that I saw that I always wanted to adopt if I ever moved up higher in the Missouri Department of Conservation is that there was a lady I met down with Arkansas State Parks, and she was the head of the interpretive programs, which are the education programs all around the state. And Kelly Farrell told me this, that she put every employee's picture up on her wall in her office with their names and a little bit about them. So not only was she seeing them every day, but she knew their names, she knew what they liked, so when she called them or she went to see them, she already knew that. She didn't go in and say, now, I know we've met, but what is your name? Or she didn't have an employee that would come up to her. I had staff come up to me, now who's that person? And I'm like, that's the director of the Missouri Department of Conservation. And they hadn't been there, or taken the time. And so all those things help people feel like part of a team, like you care about them. If you actually know their name, and not say, I did, or look at their name tag, like we always had our names on our shirts, and we're like, okay, they're looking at my name tag, otherwise they don't even know who I am. And that doesn't make people feel like part of a team. Honesty, being honest all the time with people, and that's sometimes with those tough conversations, they're not fun. And I've heard a lot of people that say, man, I don't do confrontations. My husband gave me a bit of advice when I became a manager that I carry with me to this day, and it is very simple words. He said, Lisa, if you're big enough to have the job, you're big enough to say the words. You have to be big enough to say the words. So when I was thinking of a conversation that I needed to have with somebody that would be difficult, that's what I would remember. You have to say the words. You have to figure out how to say them kindly, be kind, but you have to be honest and say the words. On the other side of it, make sure if they're doing a great job, like you all talked about, make sure you tell them. Don't just think, well, I'm only going to say something if they're screwing up or they're not doing a good job. Challenge. This is one of my favorite ones because I think life is a challenge. I think it's a great challenge. I love change. I love challenges. And I'm going to share with you a little quote from this book that I'm reading right now. It's called The Miracle Morning, and it's for real estate agents. But have you heard of it before, Laura? But it's also for anybody, and it's talking about how today's the day to make changes to make yourself better. And it's written by Hal Elrod, Michael Mayer, Michael Reese, and Jay Kinder. And they said, it's your time and this is your story. Know that wherever you are in life right now is both temporary and exactly where you're supposed to be. You have arrived at this moment to learn what you must learn so that you can become the person that you need to be to create the life that you truly want. Even when life is difficult or challenging, especially when life is difficult or challenging, the present is always an opportunity for us to learn, grow, and become better than we've ever been before. You're in the process of writing your life story, and no good story is without a hero or heroine overcoming their fair share of challenges. In fact, the bigger the challenge, the better the story. Since there are no restrictions and no limits to where your story goes from here, what do you want your next page to say? The good news is that you have the ability to change or create anything in your life starting right now. Not tomorrow, not next week, right now. So I challenge all of you to find your challenges intrinsically within yourself and not from the outside, and encourage your staff to do that as well. One of the challenges that I live by, it was a quote in my office for years, is by Eleanor Roosevelt, and I love it. And she said, do something every day that scares you to death. And so I try to live my life that way. Do something, stand up here and do a presentation for somebody. Go network. One of my biggest fears, and one of the things I'm horrible at, and Laura will probably agree with me on this, is networking. How on earth? I can't do it. It's hard. It's awful for me because I can stand up in front of a group and talk. I'm fine with that. I can talk to you one-on-one, but to walk up to a group in a networking event, I'll start shaking in my boots, and it scares me to death, and I'm just being honest. And that's something that I'm working on with this book right now because I feel like it was detrimental to Baroque Woods that I wasn't good at networking. I feel like if I don't do it now as a real estate agent, it's going to destroy my career. So it's something that I have to work on right now. So if you can think of one thing right now that you could change about yourself or your team to make it better or make your team better, what would it be? Could you, in a car? Could you? I really enjoy this, and I put this picture of the girls sliding in there because just a couple of things to highlight this is that as a softball coach, I wanted the kids to slide. You don't run into second if there's being a playmate or home or whatever. You got to slide. Well, it's scary to slide. You might skin your knee. You might skin your hip. It doesn't feel very good. So I learned very early on that if you didn't do it, they're not going to do it. So I had to get out there and slide with them. And I was a smart girl because I went and bought a slip and slide with water on it, and it doesn't hurt nearly so bad. But we practiced sliding. I remember doing that with these kids, and we practiced sliding on the slip and slide until their form was good and it wasn't going to hurt them as bad. And then they went out on the field and slid, and they were mud from head to toe. And they were having the time of their lives. And after that, sliding was a great display of skill, and they would slide. And one of my funniest stories about softball is my youngest daughter slid into second one time, and it had been raining all day, and she stopped the mud stopped her, so she didn't reach the second base, and she was out. But she came up, and this was black, and I thought she knocked her teeth out, and she had mud across her teeth. But she was grinning from ear to ear. If you wouldn't do it, your staff isn't going to want to do it. If you're on a team and you're not working beside them, instead of, there's certain responsibilities that we have if we're in the manager or a supervisory position. But if I don't work beside you, if I don't stay as late as you do, you're not going to want to stay either. So I believe firmly in I'm going to get there and work with them. I'm going to stay through the event, and I'm going to be the last person to close the door. And I think that helps them to realize that I am in it with them. I am part of them. I am not just somebody that's sitting at the desk. I think it's important in softball to set goals to get better, and it may be to win a game, but it also is like if I'm going to set a goal to work with a pitching coach this summer, or this winter in the off season, or I'm going to set a goal to practice every day for 1 hour or whatever it may be. How many of you set goals on a daily, weekly, yearly, long-term basis? I encourage you. I write them down each morning. Okay, what do I want to accomplish today? Because I'm moving from a government job where I pretty much knew, it was different every day, but I knew what was expected of me. Now, I have to make it happen. And so if I don't feel like getting up in the morning and working on things, and I do that today, big deal. If I do it today and tomorrow, tomorrow, the next day, it grows. You have to make every day count in whatever you're doing with your team, and help your staff members and your team members do it as well. Filling buckets, one of you all talked about this a little earlier, is that as a softball coach, one of the biggest things that I needed to do and I found important is to fill their buckets, to build their confidence, and to make them know that if they didn't do things, if they had a problem, because one thing about softball, you go from hero to zero and zero to hero in a matter of seconds. And so it was your job, and it's your job with your staff as well, whether you're a supervisor or not, even if you're just a team player or someone who's retired, fill other people's buckets each day. That should be one of our main priorities. Loyalty, and I just put this on here because something that I would not stand for is gossip, and because if we cut each other down, then we're tearing our team apart. And you need to role model that behavior as well. Service, we already talked about this. Our job as a supervisor or a leader is in giving service to other, and encourage your businesses not only to give service to other people on your team, but to the community by being part of chamber events and different things within our community, but also even little kids in softball. They may be of service of putting on a softball clinic for other little kids to help them learn. And this is a big one, balancing confidence and humility. I chose this picture of my daughter, Erica. This is when she played for Truman State. And Erica was a catcher. She's now an instructional coach at Fort Osage. But she, when she first started playing at a really highly competitive level, her coach told her, Erica, you're a great catcher, but you need more arrogance. Erica's a very kind, gentle, loving soul. But when she stepped on the softball field, you see that look on her face? That is not a kind face. That is a face like this is going to happen. And she wasn't arrogant, but that coach helped her build confidence to where she believed in herself, and she was able to, as a catcher, you control the game, and she was able to control the game. And so you have to balance that. The other part of it is, if I'm really good at something, I don't have to tell you how good I am at something. Everybody else is going to tell you how good I am. And so that's what I tried to teach the girls is, you have to balance those things. Both are important, but you have to be humble. So failure and forgiveness, one of the most important lessons that we can have is failure. I don't look at it as a bad thing. And I'm kind of running out of time, so I want to just go through these quickly. This is from Brene Brown, but it's a quote from Theodore Roosevelt. Have any of you guys heard about The Critic? Have you ever read this? It's very short, but it's so good, and it talks about failure, and it's helped me through a lot of tough times in my career. It's not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust, sweat, and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, and who falls short again and again. Because there is no effort without error and shortcoming. But who does actually strive to do the deeds? Who knows the great enthusiasms, the great devotions? Who spends himself in a worthy cause? Who at the very best, in the end, knows triumph of high achievement? And who at the worst, if he fails, at least he fails while daring greatly. If we don't fail, folks, we're never going to achieve greatness. And so we have to encourage our teams not to be afraid to fail and give them a chance to fail. Don't say, we've tried that before, we're not going to do it again. Let them do it. And then forgiveness is the other part of it. If they do fail, find ways to, okay, this is a lesson learned. What do we do different next time to make our team better? It's not about you, and I want you guys to remember that, is that it's not about you. There's a lot of really great things about sports, youth sports for girls or boys, but there's also a lot of things that aren't so great. And when a coach, it's all about him or her, and they want to look really good to everybody else, but it's not. It's about these little beautiful puzzle pieces in your team, whether they're young ladies or whether it's the team that you're working with. In the teen years, one of the things that I learned in retrospect, looking back at my daughters playing softball, is that it was a way for us to stay close. We were all doing, my husband, my 3 daughters, and I were all doing things that we were passionate about and that we loved, and we built together. And even in the teen years where they're bouncing all over the place and doing things they're not supposed to and rebelling in every way, we had that to draw us together. And so I want you to remember that as a way to pull your team together. If you're working on a project, if you're creating an event, if you're doing something that people are passionate about and want to come together and every voice is heard and they feel like they're contributing to it, that's the best way I know of to draw your team together. And finally, just like I said when I read from the Miracle Morning, since there are no restrictions and no limits to where your story goes from here, what do you want the next page to say? If you give a girl a softball, you not only teach her how to play a game, but you're teaching her leadership and values and forming her how she perceives herself, and it's the same way as our team. And if you allow her to find her way, there's no telling how far, and you allow your team to find their way, there's no telling how high that you will go.